The silence in our house was the first thing that broke me. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a hollow, cavernous void where my husband Nicholas's laughter used to be. We had lived a good life, a life built on mutual respect and a partnership so seamless we rarely had to speak our needs aloud. We never divided chores or kept score. He was my rock, my other half, and I was his. Our marriage was a testament to the loving homes we'd both grown up in, where our parents had modeled the same kind of unwavering partnership. I had always believed, with a certainty that felt like a law of nature, that our daughter Tanya would build a similar life for herself. She was a firecracker, our Tanya. Bright, ambitious, and with a self-esteem so solid you could build a fortress on it. We had poured all our love and support into her, and she had blossomed. Boys flocked to her in high school, but she was always focused, driven, with a clear vision for her future. When Ethan came into the picture and asked for her hand, my heart sank. He was too polished, too smooth, with a self-satisfied smirk that never quite reached his eyes. But Tanya was radiant beside him, her face glowing with a love so fierce it was almost blinding. So, with heavy hearts, Nicholas and I gave them our blessing. What else could we do? They were adults, and their love, or what I prayed was love, was a force of its own. That was 2 years ago. They bought a 2-bedroom condo in a trendy Chicago neighborhood, a starter home they could barely afford. We helped with the down payment, a significant chunk of our savings, and Ethan's parents contributed a smaller amount. Life seemed to settle into a rhythm. We had weekly dinners, and Ethan was always the perfect gentleman, polite and attentive. I never heard him raise his voice to Tanya, never saw a flicker of the coldness I sensed lurking beneath the surface. It was a carefully constructed facade, and I, desperate for my daughter's happiness, chose to believe it was real. Then, last year, Nicholas died. A sudden, brutal heart attack that stole the air from my lungs and the light from my world. The grief was a physical weight, a constant pressure in my chest. For months, I drifted through a fog, the vibrant colors of my life muted to shades of gray. Finally, I decided I needed a change, a project to pull me back into the world of the living, a full-scale renovation of our family home. It was where I had to stay, where our memories were, but it needed a new life, a new beginning. I had the money we'd saved, and it felt like the best way to honor Nicholas's memory, to make our home a place of light and hope again. But I'm an asthmatic, and the dust and fumes of a major renovation would be impossible for me to live with. So I asked Tanya and Ethan if I could stay with them for a month. They agreed, though I sensed a hesitation in their voices. If I had known what I'd uncover, I would have checked into a hotel or even slept in my car. Anything would have been better than witnessing the slow, soul-crushing destruction of my daughter's spirit. The first day was deceptively calm. They gave me the spare bedroom, a small, sterile space that felt more like a guest room in a hotel than a part of a home. We had dinner together, a bland chicken dish Tanya had clearly rushed to make after a long day at her demanding marketing job. I noticed that Ethan ate quickly, mumbled a thanks, and left his plate on the table before retreating to the living room to watch TV. Tanya, without a word, cleared the table and started washing the dishes. I offered to help, but she waved me away. "It's nothing, Mom. Just a few plates. You should rest." I bit my tongue. Every family has its own rhythm, its own unspoken rules. I was a guest in their home. It wasn't my place to judge. But as the days turned into a week, the peaceful facade began to crumble, revealing a dark and twisted reality that made my blood run cold. The man my daughter had married was not the charming, attentive husband he pretended to be. He was a king in a castle of his own making, and my daughter was his servant. My unease began to curdle into a sickening dread. I started working a split shift, from noon to 6 in the evening, which meant I was home in the mornings and saw Ethan's true colors. He had been put on part-time at his finance job, a fact Tanya had conveniently failed to mention. He would roll out of bed around 10, grab a coffee, and spend the rest of the day glued to his computer playing video games. The first time I saw it, I was stunned into silence. He'd come home from his half-day, eat the lunch Tanya had prepared for him, leave the dirty dishes on the counter and disappear into the glow of his monitor. I came home from my shift to find the mess exactly as I'd left it, with a few more dirty glasses added to the pile. I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "you've been home all day. You couldn't at least put your dishes in the sink? Tanya will be home any minute and she'll have to clean up after you." He shot me a look of pure venom, a look that sent a chill down my spine. But he got up grudgingly and moved the dishes to the sink. He didn't even bother to rinse them. I sat and washed them myself, my heart aching for my daughter. She came home a few minutes later, laden with groceries, her face etched with exhaustion. Ethan didn't even get up from the couch to help her. She scurried into the kitchen and immediately started cooking, a whirlwind of motion after a 10-hour workday. "You should cook in batches," I suggested gently. "It would be so much easier for you." She forced a smile. "Ethan doesn't like leftovers." "It's fine, Mom. I'm used to it." But it wasn't fine. It was a slow-motion train wreck, and I was the only one who seemed to see it. After dinner, Ethan once again left his plate on the table and retreated to the living room. I couldn't take it anymore. "Ethan, Tanya cooked a beautiful meal. The least you can do is clear your own plate." Tanya's face went pale. Ethan glowered at me, then stormed out of the room. I could hear him muttering under his breath. "Who does she think she is?" Tanya turned to me, her eyes pleading. "Mom, please. Don't. You're making things worse. This is just how we are. It's our life." "This isn't a life, Tanya," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "This is servitude." I washed the dishes in silence, the clinking of the plates echoing the turmoil in my heart. Later that night, I heard Ethan's voice, low and menacing, through the thin walls of my bedroom. "Why is your mother still here? She's trying to turn you against me. You need to choose, Tanya, her or me." I didn't hear my daughter's reply, only a muffled sob. My heart shattered into a million pieces. What had happened to my strong, confident daughter? The woman who now tiptoed around her own home, desperate to appease a man who treated her with such casual cruelty, was a stranger to me. The next morning, the tension in the apartment was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was getting ready for work when I heard Ethan shouting, "Tanya, where's my blue shirt? I told you I needed it for today. You said you were wearing the gray one." She whimpered. "I'll iron it right now. Just give me a minute." "A minute? I'm going to be late? You're so useless." I walked out of my room to see Tanya, tears streaming down her face, frantically setting up the ironing board. Ethan stood over her, his face contorted with rage. He called her a name, a word so vile it stole the breath from my lungs. I saw red. "Don't you dare speak to her like that," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "Who do you think you are?" Tanya rushed to my side, her eyes wide with panic. "Mom, no! Please don't. It's my fault. I forgot. It's not your fault, Tanya. He's a bully and a monster, and you're letting him destroy you." Ethan laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You see, Tanya? She's poison. She's trying to ruin our marriage. You need to get her out of our house. Today." Tanya looked at me, her face a mask of despair. "Mom, you have to go. You're tearing us apart." I stared at her, my heart breaking. The daughter I had raised, the woman I had loved and nurtured, was gone. In her place was a frightened, broken stranger, a prisoner in her own home. I packed my bags in a daze, the sound of Ethan's triumphant laughter echoing in my ears. I called a cab and left, the tears I had been holding back finally streaming down my face. I would stay in a hotel, I decided. I would find a way to finish the renovation on my own. But as I rode away from the building, I knew I couldn't just walk away. I had to find a way to save my daughter, even if she didn't want to be saved. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If this story is getting under your skin, subscribe for more real family exposés. I spent the next few days in a haze of grief and despair. I tried calling Tanya, but she didn't answer. I sent her text, begging her to talk to me, but she didn't reply. I was shut out, silenced, and the feeling of helplessness was suffocating. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't force her to leave him. I couldn't make her see the truth she was so determined to ignore. I felt like I was watching her drown, and I was standing on the shore, helpless to save her. Then, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman's voice, hesitant and scared. "Are you Tanya's mother?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah. I was a friend of Ethan's. I need to talk to you. It's about Tanya." We met at a coffee shop, and Sarah, a pale, nervous woman with haunted eyes, told me a story that made my blood run cold. She and Ethan had been involved, she said, a brief, intense affair that had ended a few months ago. She'd been racked with guilt, she said, and she couldn't live with the secret any longer. She told me that Ethan was a master manipulator, a man who thrived on control and cruelty. He had cheated on Tanya before, she said, and he would do it again. He had a gambling problem, she said, and he was deeply in debt. The part-time story was a lie. He had been fired from his job for embezzling money, and he was living off Tanya's salary, draining her bank account to feed his addiction. "He's a monster," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And Tanya is his victim. You have to get her away from him." Every word she said was a nail in the coffin of my denial. I had known in my heart that something was terribly wrong, but I had never imagined the depth of Ethan's depravity. The man was a parasite, a predator who had sunk his teeth into my daughter and was slowly draining the life out of her. I knew then that I couldn't wait for Tanya to save herself. I had to intervene, and I had to do it now. I went home and started digging. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop with a no-nonsense attitude. He confirmed everything Sarah had told me, and more. Ethan's gambling debts were astronomical. He had a string of jilted lovers, all of whom told the same story of manipulation and abuse. He had a criminal record, a juvenile offense for assault that had been sealed. The man was a walking, talking red flag, and I had let my daughter marry him. The investigator also uncovered something else, something that made my stomach churn with a new and terrible fear. Ethan had taken out a life insurance policy on Tanya, a massive policy that would pay out to him in the event of her death. The policy had been taken out just a few weeks ago, right around the time I had moved in with them. The timing was too coincidental, too chilling to ignore. Was he just a garden variety narcissist, or was he something far more sinister? Was my daughter's life in danger? I knew I had to act, and I had to act fast. I couldn't go to the police. They would say it was a domestic dispute, a private matter. They wouldn't see the danger I saw, the cold, calculating evil that lurked behind Ethan's charming smile. I had to get Tanya out of that house, and I had to do it without tipping him off. I had to be smart, and I had to be ruthless. I was no longer just a mother trying to save her daughter. I was a woman fighting for her child's life. Armed with a folder thick with evidence of Ethan's treachery, I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my heart. The grief for my lost daughter had been replaced by a fierce, primal need to protect her. I had a plan, a desperate, risky gambit, but it was the only one I had. I called Tanya and told her I needed to see her, that it was a matter of life and death. I told her to meet me at our old family vacation home, the one Nicholas and I had bought when she was just a little girl. It was a place of happy memories, a place of safety and love. I hoped that the familiar surroundings would help her remember who she was, the strong, vibrant woman who had been buried under the weight of Ethan's abuse. She agreed to meet me, her voice small and hesitant. I knew that Ethan would be suspicious, that he would try to stop her from coming. So I told her to lie. I told her to tell him that I was having a medical emergency, that I had been rushed to the hospital. It was a cruel lie, but I was past caring about the niceties of honesty. I was at war and I would use any weapon at my disposal. I drove to the vacation home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The house was just as we had left it, a charming, rustic cabin nestled in the woods. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of pine and wood smoke wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. I built a fire in the hearth, the crackling flames a welcome distraction from the frantic beating of my heart. I sat down on the old, worn sofa, the folder of evidence a heavy weight on my lap, and I waited. Tanya arrived an hour later, her face pale and drawn. She looked thinner than I had ever seen her, her eyes shadowed with a deep, soul-crushing weariness. She was wearing a long-sleeved blouse, even though it was a warm day, and I had a sick feeling I knew why. I stood up and hugged her, my arms wrapping around her fragile frame. She felt like a bird, a tiny, delicate creature that could be crushed with the slightest pressure. "What's wrong, Mom?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You said it was an emergency." "It is," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "It's an emergency of the heart. Your heart, Tanya, and your life." I led her to the sofa and sat down beside her. I opened the folder and laid the contents out on the coffee table. The private investigator's report, the bank statements, the copies of the emails and text messages, the life insurance policy. It was a mountain of evidence, a testament to Ethan's betrayal and deceit. Tanya stared at the papers, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Why is all this?" she whispered. "It's the truth, Tanya," I said, my voice breaking. "The truth about the man you married." I walked her through it, piece by piece, my voice a low, steady murmur as I laid bare the full extent of Ethan's treachery. I told her about the gambling debts, the embezzling, the other women. I showed her the bank statements, the proof that he was draining her accounts to fund his secret life. I showed her the life insurance policy, the chilling evidence of his cold, calculating greed. She listened in silence, her face a mask of disbelief. When I was finished, she shook her head, a small, desperate gesture of denial. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be true. I'm lying." "You're trying to break us up." "Am I, Tanya?" I asked, my voice rising with a mixture of anger and despair. "Am I the one who is lying? Or is it the man who has been systematically destroying you piece by piece for the last 2 years?" I reached out and took her hand, my fingers gently probing the tender flesh of her wrist. She flinched, and I knew I was right. I pushed up the sleeve of her blouse, revealing a constellation of bruises, angry purple and yellow marks that marred the pale skin of her arm. "Did I do this, Tanya?" I asked, my voice a raw, ragged whisper. "Did I put these marks on your body?" She started to cry then, a low, keening sound that seemed to be torn from the very depths of her soul. It was the sound of a heartbreaking, of a spirit shattering, of a woman finally confronting the full horror of her reality. "He didn't mean to," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush of shame and despair. "He gets so angry sometimes. He doesn't know his own strength. He always apologizes afterwards. He says he loves me." "That's not love, Tanya," I said, my voice thick with tears. "That's control. That's abuse. And it will only get worse." I told her about Sarah, about the other women, about the pattern of violence and manipulation that had followed Ethan throughout his life. I told her about the sealed juvenile record, the assault charge that had been swept under the rug. I told her that he was a predator, a man who fed on the pain and fear of others. She listened, her sobs slowly subsiding into a shuddering silence. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a look of dawning horror. She was finally seeing him, not as the charming, attentive man she had fallen in love with, but as the monster he truly was. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want to see it." "I know," I said, my heart aching for her. "But you see it now, and you have to be strong. You have to leave him." "I can't," she said, her voice filled with a new and terrible fear. "He'll never let me go. He told me he would kill me if I ever tried to leave him." "He won't get the chance," I said, my voice hard as steel. "We're not going back there, Tanya. We're going to a shelter, a place where he can't find you. We're going to file a restraining order. We're going to press charges. We're going to make sure he can never hurt you or anyone else ever again." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and a dawning, fragile hope. "Can we do that?" she asked. "We can," I said, my voice unwavering. "And we will." This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, it helps uncover more hidden family truths. I held her then, my daughter, my child, and I rocked her back and forth as she cried, the tears of a woman who had finally been set free. We stayed at the cabin for 2 days, a quiet, peaceful interlude before the storm. We talked for hours, and Tanya told me everything. The years of quiet desperation, of fear and intimidation, of a love that had twisted into a prison. She told me about the constant criticism, the gaslighting, the way he had isolated her from her friends and family. She told me about the nights she had cried herself to sleep, the mornings she had woken up with a sense of dread, so profound it was a physical weight in her chest. She told me about the woman she had become, a stranger to herself, a shadow of the vibrant, confident person she had once been. And I listened, my heart breaking for her, for the years she had lost, for the pain she had endured. But I also felt a surge of pride, a fierce protective love for the woman who was emerging from the ashes of her broken life. She was a survivor, my Tanya, a warrior who had been to hell and back and was still standing. She was bruised and battered, but she was not broken. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that she would be okay. On the 3rd day, we left the cabin and drove to a women's shelter in a neighboring state. It was a clean, safe place, a haven for women who had fled from the same kind of darkness that had consumed my daughter's life. We met with a counselor, a kind, compassionate woman who helped us navigate the legal system. We filed for a restraining order and we pressed charges. The police, armed with the evidence I had gathered, arrested Ethan at the condo. He was charged with assault, battery, and a host of other crimes. He was denied bail, and he was facing a long prison sentence. It was a long and difficult road, but we walked it together, my daughter and I. There were court dates and therapy sessions, moments of fear and doubt, of anger and grief. But there were also moments of hope, of healing, of a new and powerful bond that had been forged in the crucible of our shared trauma. Tanya was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding her life. She was rediscovering the woman she had been, the woman she was always meant to be. And I was there every step of the way, her mother, her protector, her friend. Months bled into a year, and the seasons changed, painting the world in hues of recovery and renewal. The legal battle was grueling, a marathon of depositions, hearings, and endless waiting. Ethan, stripped of his charm and bravado, was a pathetic figure in the courtroom. His attempts to pin himself as the victim, to twist the narrative and portray me as a meddling mother-in-law and Tanya as an unstable, vindictive wife, fell flat in the face of the overwhelming evidence. The bruises, the financial records, the testimony of other women he'd harmed, it all wove a tapestry of abuse, so clear and undeniable that his conviction was a certainty. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The day the judge read the verdict, a profound quiet fell over the courtroom. I looked at Tanya, who sat beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. The monster was caged. The nightmare was finally over. Life after the trial was a slow, deliberate process of rebuilding. Tanya moved back in with me into the newly renovated house that was now a sanctuary of light and peace. The ghosts of the past had been banished, replaced by the comforting aroma of baking bread, the sound of our shared laughter. We painted the walls in bright, cheerful colors, planted a garden in the backyard, and adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix who filled the house with a joyful, chaotic energy. Tanya went back to therapy, and I went with her sometimes, not as a participant, but as a silent supporter, a witness to her incredible strength and resilience. She was like a flower that had been starved of sunlight, slowly, tentatively, unfurling her petals to the warmth of a new day. She reconnected with old friends, the ones Ethan had forced her to push away. She started taking pottery classes, her hands, once bruised and trembling, now shaping clay into beautiful, intricate forms. She was finding herself again, the vibrant, creative, and passionate woman who had been hidden for so long. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, she turned to me, her eyes clear and bright. "I'd been thinking a lot about what happened," she said, her voice soft but steady. "About why I stayed for so long." I waited, my heart full of a quiet, patient love. I had never pushed her to talk about it, to analyze the why and the how. I knew she would get there in her own time. "I think I was afraid," she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Afraid of being alone. Afraid of what people would think. Afraid that he was right, that I was nothing without him." She paused, then turned to look at me, a small, sad smile on her lips. "It's funny, isn't it? I was so afraid of being alone, but I was never more alone than when I was with him." "You're not alone now?" I said, my voice thick with emotion. "No," she said, her smile widening. "I'm not." She eventually started her own business, a small online boutique selling her pottery. It was a modest success at first, but it grew steadily, her unique designs and the story of her survival resonating with people from all over the country. She became an advocate for domestic violence awareness, sharing her story not as a victim, but as a survivor, a warrior who had emerged from the darkness stronger and more compassionate than before. I still lie awake some nights, the memory of that dark time a chilling whisper in the quiet of my room. I think about the man who almost destroyed my daughter, the man who is now a ghost, a fading nightmare. And I think about my daughter, my beautiful, resilient Tanya, who has risen from the ashes of her past and built a new life, a life of purpose, of joy, of a hard-won, unbreakable peace. I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations.